and welcome to our quarterly meeting for the Public Information Department. And we know you brothers and sisters were working so hard on that 2-year no knocking pitch. It was perhaps the most localized pitch we ever had ready.
We appreciate you being with us. We have the largest audience that we've ever had, and it's appropriate because it probably is the most important quarterly meeting we've ever had. Many hundreds, if not over 1,000 interviews later, we're at this place we are today.
Our next guest is the national spokesman for the Jehovah's Witnesses, Robert J. Hendricks III.
Joining us with some clarification on what they do and do not believe, welcome Robert Hendricks, U.S. spokesman for the Jehovah's Witness. Good morning.
And I am so delighted to welcome back on our show, Robert Hendricks, U.S. spokesperson for Jehovah's Witnesses. Robert, welcome back.
Me now is Robert Hendricks, and he is the U.S. spokesperson for Jehovah's Witnesses.
When we spoke to Robert J. Hendricks.
Robert Hendricks, national spokesperson for the Jehovah's Witnesses.
And Robert Hendricks is the U.S. spokesman for Jehovah's Witnesses.
Robert Hendricks to our program. He's the U.S. spokesman for Jehovah's Witnesses.
Over the last couple days, we have seen the biggest, in my opinion, leak from Watchtower over the entire year. Now, the reason I say that is because it gives us a window into how Watchtower functions, more as a corporation and less as a religious entity. Now, the big questions that were raised when it comes to these documents and these videos are, what is the Public Information Department? Who is Robert Hendricks? And what is this Public Information Department going to be doing moving forward in 2023? And in a series of 3 videos, I'm going to answer each of those in succession. So first off, what is the Public Information Department? Let's talk about it.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
The Public Information Department is the hub and headquarters of a web of thousands of volunteers across the globe that all have one goal in mind: positive PR for Jehovah's Witnesses. And they use social media, any connections that they might have or Jehovah's Witnesses might have to journalists or any news media organization of any kind in order to make inroads, in order to try and promote as much positive PR for the Jehovah's Witnesses and Watchtower as much as possible. Now, in order to really understand the PID, Public Information Department, we need to understand what came before that, and that was the Office of Public Information. Now, one of the former heads of that department, the Office of Public Information, was Richard Devine, and let's hear in his own words what that office did.
But I was very pleased when the Office of Public Information, after a couple of years, got involved. And I began working with them when issues would come up. And it was mostly reactive, when the reporters would call or whatever, or there was a need to get on the good side of one political entity or one city agency or another.
So prior to the PID being formed, they were mostly a reactionary office. If they needed to, try and put a positive spin on a negative story, or if they had someone approaching them about a negative story, they were there to answer questions or do interviews to try and, soften that blow or make it make sense from a Jehovah's Witness perspective if they were only getting a ex-Jehovah's Witness or a secular perspective on any particular news story. Now, if you've ever been a Jehovah's Witness or you're familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, you will understand that they pride themselves on being politically neutral. They don't get involved with politics, they don't take sides, and yet we hear a clear admission from someone that was the head of their Office of Public Information say that they would try and sway any political party or news agency to their agenda. They wanted to make sure that they had the correct spin on it in a way that would maximize the benefit for Watchtower, which is very shocking to anyone that's ever been a Jehovah's Witness because it goes counter to everything they understand about Watchtower's non or completely neutral political stance they take. Unless it benefits Watchtower, then they're willing to take a stand because maybe money is involved, maybe public perception is involved. So it is really fascinating to see this little window into how Watchtower is operating as a corporation that is very concerned about how they appear to the public, whether that be the media or the political system. Now, an issue for this Office of Public Information was apostates trying to get information out of the organization. Again, let's let Richard Devine himself talk about this.
The internet hadn't really taken off then, so you didn't have the bloggers and so on at the beginning. But you did have apostates trying to dig some inside information or whatever. So they would vet that and then get an idea of what they wanted to talk about, and then they would schedule the interview, and we would discuss, what angle the organization would want to take.
So clearly, they try and vet out anyone that had questions. Remember, in this early stage, they were reactionary. So were they reacting to a news organization, or were they just acting to some quote-unquote apostates that were asking questions? And if it was apostates, no doubt they would just be like ignoring them. But at least we have an admission from Watchtower that they take notice of what apostates are saying, what apostates are doing, and how apostates are influencing the media. And they needed to try and figure out, as he said, what is their agenda going to be? Now, one of the situations that Richard Devine handled was when it came to the selling off of properties in New York City, because as we all know, that was a pretty big deal. Watchtower was based in Brooklyn. They had a lot of real estate holdings there. It was kind of the foundation. You drive across the bridge, you see the Watchtower sign with the big clock. They were very well known for their presence in the Brooklyn area. And so when the selling of that, there was a lot of interest. Now, let's see what he has to say about this particular time period when he was in charge of this Office of Public Information.
Why people were so fascinated with our real estate, I'll never know. I guess they smelled money or something, and that seemed to interest them more than anything.
Yeah, that's right.
We were producing the New World Translation in so many languages, and we had a huge campaign with the Awake on AIDS education we were trying to highlight. Nobody seemed to care about that. They just wanted to know how many buildings we had, and how much were they worth, and what are you going to do with them, and why don't you pay taxes? But
now, this is just a brief history of what was going on before the PID came into existence in 2019. And we can see they were reactionary. They were, not very successful at pushing out sort of the message that they wanted to get out there to the media, and they were more reactionary. Now, when it comes to the PID, everything changed in 2019.
And now it was nothing nearly as sophisticated as what we have now.
Now, by Richard Devine's own admission, the system has become much more sophisticated, and I'd like to give a very specific example of how they have evolved since the early days. And I'm just going to use one example, and that is how they're using social media. So basically how this functions is they have approved pitches that start with the PID in New York or wherever it might be around the world, and that goes out to a specific region. Now, what these people will do in that region is they will at them on Twitter, send them an email, hit them up on Facebook, phone call, whatever it might be, in order to get a maximum amount of media attention. Now, if this story is picked up by any news outlet, they make their sacrifice to the gods. And by gods, I mean the algorithm god, the one we all pray to and can never quite figure out. And what they do is they share that news article, they retweet it as much as possible, because when the giant Google algorithm god is looking down upon us all, they like engagement. And the more engagement a particular website, a particular video, a particular story has, that's going to bump it up in the recommendations list. Now, on any given Tuesday, I would say, hey, go and type in your web browser right now, Jehovah's Witnesses, and you're almost guaranteed to find one of these high results of something that was approved by Watchtower, some sort of pitch that they made, and an article was published. But currently, that's not really the case, because the most popular news story right now, at least as of the making of this video, is the unfortunate events that happened surrounding the shooting and the bomb situation in Colorado. So it wouldn't work necessarily at the time of making this video, but for posterity's sake, go into your web browser, type in Jehovah's Witnesses, and for the majority of the entire year, anytime I did this, it was always a positive news story that was being repeated. You could trace that news story back to some, Facebook group or Twitter, and find that it was being shared a lot amongst the group of people in that city. And they all have this same outline on their profile, which I actually think is absolutely hilarious. Yes, we're all coffee drinkers, we like accurate news stories, and we like the great outdoors. Absolutely hilarious that they all follow this exact same pattern. But this was something that the Public Information Department was using as a tool to try and push Watchtower's agenda to the forefront of, the general mass public. So that way, when people were Googling Jehovah's Witnesses, they weren't getting videos like mine. They weren't getting any information from, bloggers or people that have websites that are set up to try and be expose some of the more negative aspects of Watchtower, but it was always something positive, about, hey, we're producing Bibles. Hey, we have a convention coming up. Hey, we have kept our faith, despite the pandemic. Oh boy, howdy, we're fighting bullying in any way that we can, and we're a respected resource for that. And they were trying to push this, in my opinion, misinformation, and they were trying to use their goons across the entire world to try and have this network of people that were influencing the algorithm, as it were. So that way Watchtower had a perception of these happy, nice people that were good for the community and a positive influence. Now that we have an understanding of what Watchtower was doing PR-wise in the past, what they're doing currently, I think we need to take a step back and understand the why. And in my opinion, to really understand the why, you absolutely have to understand the head of the department. So that leaves us with the question, who is Robert Hendricks? And I will be answering that question in the next video on this series of the Public Information Department. Thank you so much for joining me for this sort of deep dive video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're still around, don't forget to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.
We appreciate you being with us. We have the largest audience that we've ever had, and it's appropriate because it probably is the most important quarterly meeting we've ever had. So we look forward to what's ahead.